ready?
Everybody's ready.
That's good. All right. All right, so we are going to take a ever so slight break from Ezekiel till next week, since Passover is this week. Do a lesson to kind of ask some questions to get us ready to go into Passover. It's not just a great time to eat good food, but it is a very serious time to consider where we are in our relationship. So call this, are you matzah or are you chametz? So we know matzah doesn't have leaven in it, but chametz has plenty. So they're both very good. They're both delicious. So talk to our Elohim and we'll take a look. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to study your word, to study ourselves. We ask that you will open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts so that we can be prepared for this special day. And we thank you in the name of Yahushua. Amen. So, are you matzah or are you chametz? Preparing for Pesach 5778. So what's the difference between matzah and chametz? They both contain flour and water, and we bake them both in the oven. And like I said, they're both tasty. We all like challah. But, you know, everybody likes matzah with a little bit of peanut butter and honey on it, or all the other wonderful things you can put on it. So we think about matzah and chametz. One of them stays flat, while the other fills itself with hot air and becomes puffed up. So what we can consider this is the difference between love, understanding, compassion, and humility, which is matzah, as opposed to the delusion of self-importance and arrogant pride, which is chametz. You know, leaven is a representation of the Torah of something we call sin, but what is sin? You know, sin is a transgression over and over and over, but sin is also a state of mind. So the first one, matzah, will allow us to leave our Egypt, while the latter, the chametz, will keep us in its bondage. The first will allow us to hear the voice of our Elohim and understand the instructions as found in his word, allowing us to call out all that Yahuwah our Elohim has said that we will do, while the latter will have a circling Sinai. Sinai comes from the root sin, that means thorns and thistles. So it's a state of being where there's only stagnant water and a lack of growth. Egypt represents bondage, and it comes from, in Hebrew it's mitzarim, it comes from the root matzor, that means to be under siege, to be bombarded. So how can we squeeze through the bars of our prison cell when we're all puffed up and full of chametz? We have to go on a diet and lose the leaven, right? We have to be willing to make ourselves flat by expelling the leaven of pride so that we can fit through the bars that keep us imprisoned in our Egypt. So as we approach Pesach, we have to examine where we are and decide where it is that we want to go. And this is actually one of the questions that's found in Bereshis. Hagar becomes pregnant, and Sarah decides she's going to mistreat Hagar, so Hagar runs away. But this is one of the questions that the messenger of Elohim asks Hagar. And we read this at Bereshit 16:8. It says, "And he said, Hagar, Sarah's handmaid, from where are you coming? And where are you going?" And she said, "I flee from the presence of my mistress Sarah." So this begins the process of cleaning out the leaven. This verse reminds us to consider where we're coming from. What is inside of our thoughts and in our lives at this point in our lives? Is it humility, love, compassion, all these things that we find in matzah? Or is it a puffed up, arrogant pride that we find in chametz? Am I all that and a bag of potato chips and you're not? So if we can answer this now, it allows us to truthfully answer the second part of that question. Where are you going? Are you moving back towards Sarah and Abraham? Every name in Hebrew has a meaning, so let's consider that. Are we moving back towards the authority Sarah, from the root sar, that means to rule, of Abraham, the exalted father. So are we moving back towards the authority of the exalted father? Or are we moving towards the barren, waterless land of the wilderness? The first option requires the tribulation that comes with change. The second doesn't require any effort other than to die spiritually. And it's often easier to die spiritually than it is to make changes to improve our relationship with our Elohim. But I doubt anybody's ever had to go through that in this room. So, the children of Israel could have crossed the Jordan River immediately after leaving Egypt, but they allowed their beliefs and assumptions to stop them. The result was 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. On their way to Sinai, Elohim provided them with deliverance at the Red Sea. But rather than to be grateful, they complained about not having water to drink. Yahuwah made the bitter water sweet for them and satisfied their thirst. Instead of gratitude, they began to complain of hunger. Yahuwah, their Elohim, gave them manna to eat. Again, instead of gratitude, they became greedy by collecting more than they needed and receiving maggots instead of the additional nutrition. Just take what you need, but don't take too much. So they'd stock up thinking, well, we're going to have a late night snack, some nice bread, and it turns out, well, they end up with some unclean food that they can't eat. But instead of gratitude, they became greedy, wanting more. Instead of teshuvah, they complained about not having meat to eat, even wishing that they were back in the bondage of Egypt where they could sit by the baskets of meat. And here they are. They recalled how good the good old days were in Egypt, where they sat by the baskets of meat, and there were cucumbers and leeks and garlic and all that other wonderful stuff to eat. So, Yahuwah provided them with an abundance of quail to eat, where instead of being grateful for the provision, they stuffed themselves with the quail. The result was a plague, because they never bothered to show any gratitude. I mean, he provided quail. 3 miles of quail around the camp, 3 feet. I mean, they didn't even have to bend over to get it. So in considering matzah and chametz, we consider where we are in our relationship with Yahweh, our Elohim. Have we removed the golden earrings from our ears to worship the golden calves in our lives? What is your connection to Yahweh, your Elohim? Are life's issues and joys greater and of more importance than a relationship with your Creator and Father? These are very important things to consider as we move towards Passover. Because at Passover, we're going to be offered the opportunity to say, yes, we want to come into this relationship. So as we approach Pesach, the remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt and the reminder to bond ourselves in a marriage relationship according to the stipulations of its ketubah. Ketubah is a marriage contract. Our marriage contract happens to be contained in 5 books, which is the Torah. So, to stay in this relationship according to the stipulations of the ketubah should be at the forefront of our minds, especially right now as we approach Pesach. So let's take some time to review some of the most important questions in the Torah of our Elohim. The first question, and in fact it's the first question that's asked in the Torah, is found at Bereshit 3:8 through 9. It's actually in 9, but we're going to take a look at 8 as well. And they heard the voice of Yahuwah Elohim walking in the garden towards the breeze of the day, not in the cool of the day, the breeze of the day, and that's a very important thing. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahuwah Elohim amongst the trees of the garden. And Yahuwah Elohim called to the Adam and said to him, first question in the Bible, where are you? So Elohim is in the garden during the breeze of the day. The word used for towards the breeze of the day is leruach, that could also translate as towards the spirit of the day. This was a spiritual connection that Adam, when I say Adam, I'm not talking about the first guy, I'm talking about humankind, had with Elohim. So Elohim is in the garden at the breeze of the day, at the spirit of the day. Yahuwah's spirit is always seeking to move towards us, but just like the verse, we seek to hide ourselves in our aprons of fig leaves. Our concept of wealth and prosperity, because I can do all things through me who strengthens me, right? The question posed here is, where are you? What is the state of your connection to Yahuwah, your Elohim? Yahuwah wasn't interested as to where his physical location was. Are you hiding behind a rock or are you behind a tree? It says, where is your spiritual state? What have you done? How bad is the damage? If you'll talk to me and make teshuvah right now, we can fix it. So are you moving towards him, or are you hiding behind whatever beliefs that you hold that keep you hidden from him? The next question is a two-part question that's found in Bereshit 3:11, which would be the second and, well, it's a two-part question. So it'd be the second question, or second set of questions that we find in the Bible. It says, and he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? So this takes us back to, we've had a year from last Passover to this Passover. How much information have we taken in? Okay. What has altered our belief system to either move towards our Elohim or perhaps taken us a few steps back? So what information do we receive that when we take it causes us to hide ourselves from our Elohim, to be separated from him? Do we depend on the word of Yahuwah, or do we depend on our own directions and instructions concerning who we are or where we are? Then the next question to consider comes at Bereshit 3:13. It says, and Yahuwah Elohim said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So, first thing he asked the man, what's going on? The man said, the woman tricked me into it. The woman puts the blame off on the serpent. The fact is, neither one of them takes responsibility. Neither one of them, as a result, neither one of them make teshuvah. Okay? So what actions are we prepared to take to correct any missteps that we may have taken in our relationship with Yahuwah our Elohim? Or let's take it one step further. What actions are we prepared to take to correct any missteps that we may have taken with one another? Because we have two commandments that Yahusha gave us. The first is to understand that Yahuwah Elohim is present, and to love Yahuwah our Elohim with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But then he said the second commandment is just like it, that we love our neighbor as ourselves. So, not only what side steps have I taken as far as my relationship with my Elohim goes, but what missteps have I taken as far as relationships with people in my life? So, what actions are we prepared to take to correct any missteps that we may have taken in our relationship with Yahuwah Elohim? Do I recognize any need to make teshuvah, or is it someone else that is responsible for my actions and my thoughts? Is it someone else that's responsible for my actions and my thoughts? So the last question for us to consider is found in Bereshit 21:17. After Hagar has been sent away by Abraham because of Sarah's jealousy. And this is a great line for the ladies to pass on to their husbands, because Abraham is arguing with Sarah about making Hagar goes, and Elohim says, dude, listen to what she says. So there we go. So something for the husbands, right? I always listen to my wife. I say, in my house, my word is law. As long as Trina says it's okay. Okay. So the last question to consider is found in Bereshit 21. It says, and Elohim heard the voice of the boy, and the messenger of Elohim called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for Elohim has heard the voice of the boy where he is. So let's take this maybe a little topically, but maybe a little deeper than what we read. The name Hagar means to take flight. So when we consider the question, what is the matter with you, Hagar? We ask ourselves, what are the issues in my flight plan? When you go to fly an airplane, not that I'm a pilot, but you have to file a flight plan so people will know where you are in the event that you get lost. Do I require a course correction because I've discovered that I'm flying away from my Elohim instead of towards him? We read on in this scenario that Elohim made provision for Hagar and her son. Nonetheless, the question to consider from this prior to Pesach is, what is the matter with me? And what do I need to correct before I make the decision to yoke myself to Yahuwah my Elohim during the 7 days of Pesach? You know, it goes beyond simply being a celebration. Oh, I'm remembering the Exodus from Egypt and yada, yada, yada. But Yahushua also gave us an example of what goes on in this time. That prior to the Passover, he got his disciples together and said, this is your time to make a commitment to your Elohim. Are you going to make the commitment to Elohim or not? So many people during this time of Pesach strain their lives in a panic to remove the physical leaven from their homes. Is it not much more important to look for and remove the spiritual and psychological leaven that keeps us in a state of chametz and prohibits us from becoming matzah? So as Pesach approaches, will you seek to discover where you are and where you're going by seeking to know what is the matter with you, so that you can make the changes necessary to seek a strong relationship and bond with Yahuwah your Elohim? Again, good question to consider between now and then is, are you matzah or are you chametz? What is your state of being? Short and sweet, almost painless, but some things to consider before the big day. Now, we are celebrating or having our dinner Friday evening, but unleavened bread doesn't start until the evening towards the evening of Monday. I think I got that right, or something like that. Yeah, I think that. So we will go on that to base the count to get us straight. So as a group, we come together Friday to remember, but as the count goes, it actually starts a couple of days later. Yeah, the counting of the Omer, exactly. All right, so I guess grooviness has been achieved.